he lived in the French Quarter as well. He was an economist. He monitored world economies and this whole thing. And in this, it's kind of it's a pretty funny story because he, I think in '92, he wrote an op-ed piece that was based on him reading two side-by-side articles in the New York Times. One was Yeltsin was leasing out oil and timber fields in Siberia. And then the other article was, I think Dan Quayle at the time, I don't know who, was proposing a $3 trillion, Mars exploration thing. And so Walter wrote this op-ed piece to the LA Times suggesting that we take the $3 trillion, never mind Mars, just go lease out those oil fields, and sort of unite Russia and the United States, and that's what would become one big thing, and everybody kind of just buzzed about it, and it really did actually kind of trigger all this sort of conversation, and eventually GQ magazine decided to send him to Russia to propose the idea. And and I kind of knew he was sort of doing this, and I said, "Oh yeah, I took Russian in high school and stuff." And
so you went on the trip. I'm starting to remember this now.
So he goes, he said, "Well, why don't you?" He said, "They're not going to pay you, but they'll definitely publish your photographs." And so I kind of financed my half of it and went to Russia, and we flew to Anchorage, talked to the Anchorage Economic Council and what they thought about it. I mean, it was really kind of this very sort of funny thing, and then to Vladivostok, and then Irkutsk and Moscow. So that's,
tell us about these images.
These sailors on the left, they were photographed in Vladivostok in the east, the Far East, and that was kind of the mother port of the Russian fleet. It was the only ice-free water for the Navy fleet. So that's where most of those, they were sort of located. And things at that time, I mean, stuff was just falling into the water. I mean, you could see these big ships just rusting, and I mean, it just really was kind of a mess. This one, the demonstration of Moscow, that was when we kind of flew directly to Moscow sort of quickly, because that was when there was sort of this attempted coup, where the White House had been taken over, the Russian White House, and Yeltsin had left Moscow. I don't know. There was just it was kind of a war zone in Moscow, in the streets. Like everybody had left the city, and it was just sort of. And this was a demonstration. And
didn't this happen rather spontaneously?
Oh yeah,
this photograph.
Yeah. I mean, it was kind of weird being there. I mean, under those circumstances. I mean, because there were tanks flying through the streets and stuff. It was kind of.
Was it scary?
Yeah, I thought it was pretty scary. It wasn't. I wasn't photographing a flag in an old house in upstate New York. I mean, which was what I preferred, but it was kind of an invigorating experience. And I did love the photo. I mean, I love taking portraits and stuff, and I did sort of love the pictures that I had gotten from it. And they did publish the pictures, and it was sort of interesting.
You got photo credit, I hope.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And they had said, the editor had said, very point blank that she had kind of never seen photographs like the ones she, they weren't. I couldn't really tell you what she really meant, but I mean, she was talking about her, general sort of news. Photojournalistic photographs that she kind of felt that they were sort of.
Well, because you have this refined eye, you have this classical
sensibility. Yeah, I don't know if it was refined. It was just kind of a little bit off, I think.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it was, I photographed the toilet on Aeroflot, I mean, it was just sort of, just wasn't pretty, I mean, there were just things that were going on that were just very kind of odd and, yeah.
Well. Let's now, this is one of your earliest images of something, of food, which is what we focused on here in our exhibition, this banana diptych. Tell us, this is the first one you've actually, taken some kind of food article and arranged it to look very sculptural, and in this case, you've actually made a diptych out of two photographs. So tell us, how did that idea come about for you? What was your process?
Well, I think that for one, coming from the Northeast, I mean, I've seen banana trees before, you know, in other travels. But I think to kind of be living in a place where they are just sort of growing kind of in your backyard was sort of a kind of a wonder unto itself. And a friend of mine who was who did landscaping in New Orleans, he, you know, the woman who owned the house just couldn't stand, you know, just wanted those bananas chopped down, and that's it. So he had dropped this off to me, and it was like kind of literally kind of waiting, you know, on the balcony, you know, and I was living in a little, again, it's another little slave quarter. It's only about 10 feet wide. They're long kind of things that shoot off the back, and you know, there's just a couple little rooms. And so this picture, I think, is just, it's kind of, it was a very beautiful northern light that this little space had. And the only reason it's a diptych was because I really couldn't get it in the camera all in the same one shot. Mm-hmm. And so really you're not seeing a long table, you're just seeing a short table. Like each table, you know, that's the table, and then the banana was moved so that the stem moves with it. This, you know, the bunch was first photographed, and the stem is kind of falling off the table. Then the bunch is moved off the table and kind of worked out that way, just to have kind of this sort of, and then, you know, in the end, to me, it's just sort of this real portrait of a real primordial.
Well, and this is something that I think, for those who have seen the show already, your photographs, your food does tend to have an anthropomorphic quality almost consistently throughout.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like, for me, I was just like, I'm just going to photograph this exactly as it is. And I think in this particular case, it almost looks like a fossil, a carcass, yeah, something, yeah. So.
Okay, now we don't have any of your portraits here in person, so we thought we'd show some in the presentation, because when we did your retrospective in New Orleans, of course, we had a whole section, and I think all three of these images were in the retrospective. And, and your subjects, I'm going to ask you in a minute to tell us, you know, who they are, how you found them, how you got them to pose for you. And but also they all, I mean, seem to look like not really contemporary folks, you know, they seem to look like they...
Which is certainly what attracts me to
them. Like
them,
McDermott and McGuff, who you referred earlier, you know, this sort of look like they come from another time zone.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's, I mean, they're photographed in exactly the same spot as the banana diptych. For one, I mean, so.
And these were all French Quarter denizens, is that right?
Yeah, they all kind of live in the French Quarter. The woman on the left, her name was Cynthia, who I know, she was just a stranger on the street, and she just had a very beautiful, you know, frieze, just a very beautiful hairstyle. And, you know, just asked her if she would be kind of interested in being photographed, and you know, she said yes. And it was, you know, kind of a very sort of, it was very exotic for her to kind of come over to my place to do that, and very, you know, it was just a very nice, simple kind of experience with dealing with the stranger. And you know, the picture is, as it turns out, I mean, it just, that pearl earring and the whole sort of, you know, Vermeer kind of thing, it just sort of had I kind of sort of saw it as a sort of a really sort of beautiful cameo. I mean, I've struggled with doing profiles, but her particular profile I thought was just kind of beautiful. And it's like one shot out of, you know, 5 or 6 rolls or something that kind of just has that nice balance to it. The second guy, Rudolph, just a really eccentric guy, originally from Austria, a photographer, and also a house painter. And I can't specifically.
How'd you find him? Do you remember?
He's always kind of roaming around
the quarter.
The quarter, mm-hmm. And I think he had seen some of my photographs, and he has a very sort of 19th century kind of aesthetic as well, very kind of traditional. And I think he kind of, you know, he always sort of embarrassingly, you know, he'd say, "Oh, the master, you know, David the master," and you know, or he'd look at my photographs and go, "Oh, you're slipping, you know, you're really falling off, you know, this is no good." And so just one day, you know, I photographed him, just a real spontaneous portrait, and he had no interest in seeing it. You know, he just like.
Did he ever see it?
No, he was like, I don't want to see it. I don't want. He was very kind of a dramatic guy. Then the other guy, Amesy, his name was Amesy.
Is he still there? I remember
He's still
him.
roaming
Yeah,
around, and he's just, you know, bald on top. And I have pictures of him that way too.
And he's an artist,
but
right?
you know, yeah, and you know, this is his garb. You know, he's just sort of, and it's like the bananas. You know, it's just it is what it is, and they're very straightforward portraits. And I think, I mean, I'm just, you know, and obviously they have this sort of, you know, from another time, you know, kind of look to them, and that is sort of, you know, my attraction to them.
How about the lighting? How do you deal with that?
The lighting is sort of diffused. It's just window light, you know, single light. I generally diffuse it with sort of a thin curtain, and have a little, you know, sort of bounce, sort of a white board or some sort of reflector that kind of fills in, and that's it. Just very
And the poses determined by them or you?
The poses?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's definitely determined by me, but it's really, I mean, a lot of people can just fall asleep, you know, sitting for me. I mean, it can get pretty dull, you know. I mean, because it's, you know, you're just really moving them, you know, like half inch by half inch, you know, and something eventually I think does kind of find its balance, you know, and I think that I mean that happens with the still lifes too, because the photographs are constantly in this instant, you know, and then there's a chain, you know, blah, blah, blah. But they're kind of you know, they're long exposures. I mean, not too long, but 3 or 4 second exposures, and I don't know. It's pretty simple lighting, pretty basic.
Okay.
Tonga.
And speaking of your world travels, you've been to some unusual places, including the South Pacific.
Well, Tonga was just another situation where a friend of mine, who was this other landscaper who I was working for, he had been in the Peace Corps in Tonga, and he had been back a few years prior to the time that I went, in '95, and there were just a lot of changes that had been going on. I mean, they had electricity when he went, you know, in '93 when he went back, like they had electricity, and they didn't have electricity when he was there in the Peace Corps and this whole thing. So he asked me if I would go and kind of document, like, go take pictures. I mean, he had he loved it, and I mean, it's in the South Pacific, so I'm like, okay, I'll go.
Tell us about these photos then, where we are, who these people are, how you found them.
They're just, you know, they're just basically moving around kind of the main island of Tonga, and that's really all I can say. I mean, the gentleman on the right in the market, you know, there is this sort of kind of it's a matriarchal sort of society where you know, if you don't have any girls, you raise one of the boys as a girl, you know, all the traditions, you know, the weaving and the, you know, all the sort of things that go with the culture, the Tongan culture. And so this guy, I think...
We're getting some static from your mic. If you can just move it a little closer to your mouth or something. Adjust your coat. Okay.
Sorry.
It's okay.
It's... they're called, you know, they're called whakalatis. And they really are sort of very... they're, you know, I think when they turn like 16 or something, they're given that choice to sort of carry on as a, you know, as a female member of society or as a male member of society. They can kind of marry, but this is sort of more of a. I think this guy kind of moved more into a drag queen sort of. Mode. Yeah. I mean, I think he's even drinking a beer, which is really you know, it's not.
How did he feel about being photographed?
Loved it. Loved it.
Really?
I mean, he was really performing around that market, you know.
And the other picture.
And the other one's just she's a farmer, you know. She's tending this big sweet potato field. You know, everybody.
Did you ask her to pose, or did you pose her in any way?
I did not. You know, she was just sort of working her way down that thing, and she just kind of took that great, you know, stance. I don't know, just kind of
And then you've also taken a lot of wonderful landscapes, so we thought we'd show first some from Tonga. What are the, where are we, where are we in these
This
pictures?
is,
They're very
again,
exotic looking.
on the left, those are pandanus trees, which, of course, they make a lot of their sort of, what the woman was wearing was sort of made from pandanus trees. It's a big, kind of big matted, if you go back to the sweet potato farmer. I don't know if you can do that.
Oh, I can do it this way.
Like that is that is something that's made from those leaves. It's a weaving, and it's a mat that kind of wraps around her. And, it's used for all sorts of things, whether you're kind of like napping in the afternoon or carrying things. It's just sort of a very sort of traditional dress. And it's just, like I said, it's just a big mat that wraps around. And then that other landscape was, it's really, it's the bush. It's where people have their plots of farmland that they're tending to. Like that woman is,
Tending her plot.
tending her, her plot in the bush. It looks very kind of, it is sort of jungle, but there's actually a lot of sort of cultivated things going on in there. Whether it's vanilla beans or sweet potatoes or bananas and so on and so forth. So that's what those are.
And then these are some other landscape images from the 90s. I thought we'd throw them in. Tell us about where these places
I think
are
that,
and what attracted you to photograph them.
I think that, even kind of like referring back to the other two, landscapes and then seeing these, I think that a lot of times when I do landscape, I don't think it's really, it's not always about a specific space, place. So I think that, like the Makassar Straits, it's in Indonesia, and it doesn't really say Indonesia to me, but maybe it's just a little more iconic, I think, just sort of, but that was in Indonesia, and then the Vineyard Reflection is just sort of what I think is sort of a nice moment over a pond in Martha's Vineyard.
And then you went back to Tonga a second time.
Second time, yeah.
In 97.
Yeah.
And tell us what we're looking at.
Well, those are basically Tongan South Pacific artifacts. And
how did you happen to be photographing them?
Well, my friend Lenny, we had gone back with, and I had brought a bunch of prints to kind of give back to, a bunch of the people that I had photographed in '95. And then this was a school where my friend Len had been teaching, and on the school grounds was this little museum that was really kind of run down. And this was just a great kind of example of doing something I didn't want to do, It was sort of like, I just really kind of had no interest in kind of doing this, photographing these artifacts and stuff. And I, it was just something that was in my head at the time. And then I was just sort of left in that museum by myself. And literally, glass cases were broken, and it was just a mess. It was really, it closed off to the public for years. And so this just became this kind of really quick, like I just did this very quick kind of, I picked my spots. I would just sort of kind of be pulling and picking implements and just not even knowing really what they were.
And is this how they were arranged?
No.
No, you arranged them yourself?
Yeah. I was taking them from the cases, and
I got it.
And
okay.
It was just this whole kind of, and this was really like a documentative thing. It was really kind of, it was sort of to photograph things that would be kind of just, second nature to anybody in Tonga. Just...
but exotic to us.
Exotic to us, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Those are water bailers on the right, and then just some ceremony canes on the right. And you photograph those things, and then the water bailers, let's say, and then you see them getting into boats, and they've got plastic gallon jugs cut exactly like that. They cut out the top, and they're just using these those just very standard and it's like, oh, okay, and so just a lot of things were becoming less and less organic. And in the end, I kind of, as a group of pictures, I don't know, there's probably 40 of these shots of these different artifacts. As a sort of after the fact, when I got home, printed them, they just were really a beautiful kind of graphic, abstract. They just really had a nice quality that I had kind of just, I would not have sort of gotten involved in had it not been for a very specific, kind of other idea. And so for me, I live with these at home, like kind of all the time. I like having these particular pictures around me. I don't know, they're just kind of beautiful.
And interestingly enough, when you returned back home and you started arranging food, the food looks almost as exotic now.
Yeah, and I never even made that connection.
Yeah.
Until,
well, first of all,
seeing
you
this
chose,
kind of like...
you chose a very strange kind of fruit here.
Well, the durian fruit at the
Yeah.
top, yeah. I had all these sort of...
Where do you get durian fruit?
These were
Yeah.
all from the Asian markets on the West Bank in New Orleans.
In New Orleans,
Yeah, so the big Vietnamese community. And so these things were all they all came from over there. And I had these things and was sort of photographing them.
Were you still in the small space or were you in a larger space?
I was
now?
actually in a larger space
Yeah.
this time, and this wall just happened to be kind of a dark wall that was in one of these rooms that in my apartment. And had been spending kind of all day photographing these things individually and really not feeling like I was kind of getting anywhere. And, I probably have like 10 rolls of film of all these individual objects, these food objects. And then I have 2 frames where I just really kind of just said, screw it. And, I just threw it all in, it was just kind of like everybody's in the picture. And